Today we're here to talk to you about process mapping and standard work documentation for ankle-foot orthoses. Our project took place at a university-based orthotics and prosthetics center. It provides comprehensive orthotics and prosthetic services to its patients. One item they create are called ankle-foot orthoses. They're devices used to support the ankle and feet by maintaining proper alignment in the lower limbs. They're custom fabricated and made of plastic. The main objective of our project was twofold. First, we were to observe the AFO fabrication process, and second, we were to create documentation to describe the process flow in the current state fabrication and the timing associated with each step. A secondary objective we had was to identify factors that affected time and labor content of the process flow. The scope started from the time the clinician submitted the work order to the time of final clinician inspection. Our team has decomposed the fabrication process into 3 stages: pre-processing, processing, and post-processing. An outline of the observed process is shown. We observed multiple technicians and documented all discrete steps in the process. We performed interviews, time studies, used mode apps analysis, and performed methods analysis.
Now we will move on to the pre-processing stage of creating an AFO. First, the clinician will see what the patient has ordered and then analyze how the cast is modified and then create a plaster mold in order to make the cast. After the plaster has dried, the clinician will then take the mold that he just created and strip and sand off the original plaster in order to mark trim lines for where the technician will eventually cut the new AFO. Once the plaster is completely stripped and sanded off the new model for the AFO, the clinician will pass the work order on to the technician. The communication between the clinician and technician is normally through a work order, but sometimes verbal communication is needed as displayed in our picture. Next, the technician takes over the process as we move into the main processing stage of creating an AFO. First, after insurance approval, the technician will then begin to work on the AFO, first attaching it to a vacuum vise and sealing it down to this vise in order to get heated plastic onto the mold. Our team decided to perform a MODAPS analysis on moving the heated plastic from the oven onto the AFO. So first, this included retrieving the melted plastic from the oven, where it took around 2 seconds of actual time, but modular time took 1.677 seconds. Next, I moved the heated plastic from the oven to the workbench on top of the AFO, where it took me 6 seconds to actually do it, but modular time had me do it in 4.9 seconds. Then I placed the entire heated plastic on the AFO and then smoothed it down initially, which required several back and forth motions reflected in the MODAPS code. This actually took 11 seconds when MODAPS believed it would take 7.74 seconds. I turned on the vacuum in order to get a tight vacuumed fit for the plastic, which took 1.5 seconds with modular time of 0.774 seconds. Next, I repeated the smoothing plastic step with the vacuum on, where it took me 10.5 seconds, where modular time ended up having it be 9.288 seconds. Lastly, I pulled at the end of the plastic in order for the plastic to form over the mold, where it took me 1 second, where MODAPS time had me take 0.645 seconds. In conclusion, it took me 9 more seconds than MODAPS predicted for me to place the heated plastic on the AFO, and this could entirely be because it was my first time performing this task and I had some assistance from the technician. Processing stage, where the technician would then trace the trim lines in a darker color and then cut the plastic based on the specified trim lines and remove any unnecessary plastic to make the plastic AFO. Lastly, the technician would use the sanding tools in order to ensure there was no loose plastic sticking out in order to ensure a comfortable fit on the patient.
I'd like to take you through the post-processing fabrication step. In post-processing, the technician measures the AFO to see where to place a Dacron strap. Pieces of Dacron and Velcro are then cut and sewed together, and a soldering tool is used to heat the edges and place a hole in the center of the strap. Then a drill is used to place holes in the actual AFO where the straps will be attached. We would now like to introduce you to our findings and recommendations based on this study. According to the analysis completed in this project using methods from our IOE 463 course, we determined that the average processing time for a standard AFO is approximately 4.8 to 6.1 hours. The Orthotics and Prosthetics Center AFO fabrication procedures are adequate for the current operational state, but we suggest additional study and data collection. According to our methods analysis, we determined that there are 80 steps for the entire process. About 4 hours of this is value-added work, 2 minutes is non-value-added work, and an hour and a half is non-value-added but required work. We propose 5 recommendations that the Orthotics and Prosthetics Center should consider implementing. The first is a standard work procedure for all AFO production. The second is changing the position of the insurance approval step in the fabrication process. We next suggest that the Orthotics and Prosthetics Center consider increasing communications between clinicians and technicians and determine how to better utilize their resources during time that workers may be idle. Finally, we suggest that the Orthotics and Prosthetics Center pinpoint transfer paper issues to prevent the ink getting on their patients' bodies. In conclusion, the average processing time for an AFO is between 4.8 and 6.1 hours, and the work procedures used by the Orthotics and Prosthetics Center are adequate at this time. Through MODAPS analysis, time studies, methods analysis, and interviews, we determined that the overall fabrication process is well defined, but we also do suggest 5 recommendations, as we previously stated.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. We'd like to open the floor to any questions at this time.